Okay, thanks everyone for joining. We've got a few here in the office as well. Um, so they're going to kind of listen to me out of the corner of their eyes. And I'll make this, of course, we're going to record this and we post it on YouTube and we'll post it on our internal Facebook group so you guys can reference in the future. Um, Let me get into my screen here. All right, you guys should see a presentation up online right now. Okay, so good morning. So the main intent of this, and sorry for this has been delayed for a little while. So what I wanted to do is basically put together a high level view of what I do to basically, the timeline and then the customer communication after listing a luxury property. So some of this stuff wouldn't necessarily apply to every property because there's a cost, to some of this at least. So you guys would use your judgment to scale back, or maybe you omit some of the advertising and marketing and campaigns, or scale up if you really want to get things done, or prove to your clients, that you're the agent that they want, and then leverage that for future listings. So, and I apologize in advance. I'm a big fan of using Gamma. If you guys aren't using Gamma to do presentations for you based off of your notes, um, and your notes should help derive ChatGPT will help derive notes for you. So you got to leverage these things. And if you participated in the AI call yesterday, you will have learned a lot of that. But if you haven't, come talk to me, and I'll tell you how you can actually use that stuff kind of in your daily realtor lives. But nonetheless, I have no idea who this agent pictured is here. This is all AI driven picture content. Okay, so first slide here, just basically what I talked about. So again, this is the context here is think of let's say $4 million listing, right? So we're not going to talk about how I got that or the pre-listing or then a listing appointment. All that stuff has either been covered already in classes, which you can review online, or we're going to cover those more in depth. And then indeed, some of what I'm going to tell you today, there will be breakout sessions, right? AdWerx, if you haven't used AdWerx, like that's its own thing. If you haven't done retargeting ads on Facebook or Meta, I should say, we could spend days talking about that as well. So I'm gonna kind of glance on those topics at a high level, and then we'll either explain those more in depth in future classes, or you guys are always available to come talk to me or Matt one-on-one and go through a lot of this stuff. So let's get this party started. All right. So this is so again, this is legal luxury. So that's our is and will be continue to grow our revenue share syndicate. So we're going to start seeing a lot more agents that are out of market from Sarasota into this as well, just to leverage kind of these resources and training as they, enter and thrive into the luxury market. Um, so I'm a big fan of, having processes in place. For one, it really kind of controls quality because you know that you're doing the same thing over and over in a repeatable way. But also it cuts down on your work, right? Why would you go into a listing and then not be prepared of what you're going to do after it goes live, right? It's relatively easy to list every step that you want to do and then build out your communication with clients ahead of time so that you simply know, okay, on day three, I have to copy and paste this, stick it into an email, change the names. Obviously, if you have to modify it a little bit. But otherwise, you've got a daily reminder of what you need to do and what you should be doing on the marketing side. And then it's easy to discuss that during your listing appointment, right? Or in your listing presentation or your hard books that we talked about. So I just think whatever you do in real estate, there should be a process behind it. So this is my process. Whether you use it or not, that's fine. But I think it's a good framework that you guys can build on. And then, as I said, there's going to be communication in this. So the big thing, especially now with the difficult market, communication is paramount, right? Because it's not abnormal, especially at the luxury level, for you to list something and there's just no showings for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That's very normal. right? So when clients, and this is true on the buyer side as well, when they don't hear from you, they assume the worst always. And that's a general rule in communication with anybody or any client in any industry, but especially in real estate, especially this market. If you're not communicating with your sellers, especially in the upfront, kind of time frame on a daily basis, you will quickly lose their confidence because you're not going to be able to back that up with showings and offers, right? When there's no product of your work, and there's no communication about what you're doing, they just assume you stuck it in the MLS and you're just going to let it sell itself, right? And that may have worked, 2, 3 years ago, but it certainly does not work in today's market. Okay. All right, again, so the written process is key, right? You're setting expectations with your client. You're elevating your brand because you're showing that this is something that you do on a repetitive basis. Um, and then that's going to help you win future referrals, right? Because they're going to see that you've laid out this process, you followed it. They're going to be very happy with, at least in the initial stages, your communication and what you've done. And I'll tell you, most agents don't do this. They will just list and they don't have a constant communication and they're not over communicating what they're doing, right? It's all kind of like duck's feet under the water, right? They're doing all that, but all their client sees is the duck kind of gliding, right? So you really cannot over communicate, especially in the beginning. Every single thing you do, there's nothing wrong with letting your clients know, right? Whether it's text, and we'll talk, a lot of this is text and email. And you guys know I'm a big believer in video content, and we'll talk about that in a second. So sending them videos, personalized videos, or part of your video series on selling, all that stuff, just over communicate, right? They will remember that, even if you don't have the results, at least initially. And when it comes time for them to refer, they're going to remember that treatment. And you're building an engine that kind of just kind of systematically continues on its own. Okay, so I basically have an 18-day launch cycle. Again, I apologize. Boy, that's not even English that they pump out in that photo above. But this is what it looks like. So there's basically pre-launch stuff, right? So that is basically once you win the listing, um, you know, kind of stuff that happens ahead of 0 day. I say 0 day is basically when you go live in the MLS, right? That is kind of like our, zero, whatever AD, BC, whatever the analogy is. And then you have your launch phase, right? I say that's kind of day zero, so live first 3 days. Um, that's when you're going to be doing a lot of the stuff, right? So there's a lot before, and then once you go live, there's a lot of because a lot of these platforms you have to wait till it's live, right? Because they syndicate with the MLS, or you're at least using the media that's in the MLS. So those first 3 days are very busy, right? And then there's kind of I call it the amplification page or phase. So that's kind of like day 4 through 9, 10. Again, this varies by listing, or sometimes you get things really quick. Sometimes it takes a little longer, right? So none of this stuff's set in stone, but these are basically the phases. And then at a certain point, you've got everything launched and it's going, right? So your ads are going, or at least things are, your postcards have been ordered, all this stuff is done from a work ahead of time sort of perspective. And then it's just an ongoing cycle of improvements, or maybe you will shoot additional content, or maybe you'll change up your ad strategy based on kind of the loop of feedback and page views and saves and favorites and all that stuff. But these are the 4 phases. So I include this because I think one of the things we've talked about in the previous class is, again, I love video content. So you have to have, what I recommend is having a video series for the selling process. And you're going to include that in your pre-listing campaign. So we talked about that, right? Ahead of your listing appointment, there's a lot of stuff you provide. A lot of that is high touch, just elegantly packaged, that you provide ahead of your listing agreement or your appointment. so that by the time you get to the listing appointment, you've already won them as a client, right? There's a whole process to that. Um, and we've talked about that. That is our before the door is what we like to call that phase. But this selling video series is part of that, right? So you're going to deliver a series ahead of time, and it can be 3, 5, 10 videos. And you're going to do, you're sitting basically talking head video, explaining what's happening to your clients, right? So you're going to say pre-launch, right? And you're going to go through all about the coming soons and what that does and how it builds anticipation, right? And those are going to be short videos, kind of a minute to 3 minutes at the most. And you're going to do one for each thing, right? And then you're going to do another video that talks about the media and what you're shooting and how they should clean or declutter and what your process is and how long that takes and that sort of stuff. Just so they have an idea of what this whole process is. You're going to build that series out, going live, and then your amplification phase where you're going to talk about all the stuff you're doing and how you're going to market it. And then the ongoing cycle phase where you're going to talk about, based on the results, we're going to modify things, we're going to shoot additional content, we're going to do new ad strategies, or maybe different feeder markets, right? Because this time of year, there's a lot of people from Chicago, but as we get closer to the summer, then it's people that are relocating for schools, right? So that maybe there's more of a local presence. So all that stuff you're going to capture in videos. And then you'll go through the inspection, when we get an offer, negotiating that, you're going to do a video on the inspection and what that is and what expectations they should have. So you're going to build this all out, and that stuff is used for every single transaction. None of that is personalized. It's the same. So once you have this built out and you set your playlist, typically in YouTube, you can then send a link to all of your clients before the listing appointment. So they can click on it. They're looking at your videos. They know all of this process ahead of time. And as they see you on video and you're talking to them, they feel like they're getting to know you, right? So that's the whole intent of the whole before the door phase for us, is that you're building a rapport and earning their trust before you actually step into the listing appointment, right? Because if you just wing it and you're relying on your charm and maybe you built this awesome template you're going to go through, right? Chances are you're not going to win because somebody ahead of you has taken the care and time to do all this stuff ahead of time, right? Okay, sorry, that's a long explanation on those 4 phases, but this is how you kind of break it down just easily. Okay, so let's talk about coming soons. So coming soons, if you watch real estate news, we have this whole clear cooperation rule in place with the realtor boards and by extension the MLSs, basically saying that as soon as you market a property outside of your brokerage, you have to list the property in the MLS within 24 hours, right? It is a hard rule. Some MLSs in different states have different rules. They will actually allow a coming soon where you can market that for a while. So there is not a national standard to this, which makes it even more difficult. But a lot of the larger brokerages have their own internal network that you're allowed to basically list a property before the MLS and then market that internally within your brokerage. And that currently is allowed. There are some brokerages, Compass, for example, is really putting up a fight about this, whether that best serves the client, right? If they have a seller that wants to sell the property but does not want it to be publicly listed for maybe its privacy reasons, or maybe they just want to put a number out there, kind of a make me move number. Or maybe they want to list it, but they don't want the stigma of having, a ton of days on market, this sort of thing. So Compass is arguing that they should be allowed to list those properties as well and not follow this kind of arbitrary clear cooperation rule that says it has to go in the MLS, right? They're saying that that rule is self-serving for the MLS and the realtor boards. So it doesn't necessarily matter what we think about that or what we believe. I would just encourage you to be able to react to how this decision eventually becomes. Like this will be last year and part of the year prior was all about buyer broker agreements, right? And there was all litigation and lawsuits. This is the next phase. This clear cooperation will be a complete mess and drama within NAR. It already is. Compass got kicked off of Washington State's MLS, right? So any MLS or any agent in Washington that is a Compass agent does not have access to MLS. I don't think that's been changed recently. So that's a big deal, right? So bottom line is EXP has, we have this system called EXP Access. It is I think Zendesk or Zenlist is the machine behind that, but they allow you to do a coming soon, right? So I would highly encourage you, as soon as you win the listing and you got your listing agreement assigned, either ask the owner for photos or take a few of your own photos, uh, higher quality if you can, and list it coming soon, right? So what that does within EXP, since we have so many agents, it will broadcast all of those agents, and you're allowed to reach out within the brokerage and market the property as much as you can, right? So we use Workplace right now, internally within EXP. You can put your listing on there. There's a whole coming soon hashtag, I think, or page. Um, and then obviously you're allowed to reach out to agents, right? So if you have referral partners, which is another thing you should do, and we'll do a class on that in these feeder markets, right? Chicago, New York, New Jersey, right now California, Orange and LA County are the three largest. You should be reaching out to those agents as referral opportunities, right? So you're gonna advertise this as a coming soon on EXP Access, and then also internally within the brokerage, right? That is allowed all day long. It's something that our competitors here locally that may have a large local presence, but they don't have agents in all these feeder markets. So they can't do that, right? And I think this is going to be a thing pretty soon. So this will actually, when you go on listing appointments, especially in the luxury market, where a lot of these owners they don't want things publicly listed, right? Or they don't want Joe Schmo public scene on Zillow and trying to make appointments in their house and stuff like that. So if you come from one of these large brokerages with lots of agents, it's going to be an advantage for you during your presentations as well. Um, so you're going to list it on there, right? And then you're going to communicate this with the seller, right? It's one of your touch points, right? So you win the listing, then you've got this phase where you're doing all your signage and your postcard and scheduling your photos and media, and start thinking about listing description and all this stuff. So that is like a dark period for most agents with their clients, right? The client knows that there's a lot of stuff going on, right? But send them an email, right? So maybe 2 days after, you sign the listing thing and you say, hey, this is going to go live in a week, right? Whatever you can schedule and whatever the expectations are. I usually say a week, and that gives me enough time to build things out. It might be more than that, it might be less than that. But you're gonna send this email. Hey, just so you know, this is listed now as a coming soon, and it's broadcast to our 87,000, 95,000 agents, whatever EXP's current number is, or whatever brokerage you may work for. Sorry. And just explain the importance of that, right? Hey, obviously, if we can sell this off market, there's a huge advantage for you because it's going to sell right away, and what yada yada yada, right? Build that out and communicate it, right? And then communicate all the other stuff you're doing. Hey, obviously, you're going to talk about, like, I've got photos scheduled on Wednesday because they're probably going to have to give you access, right? So you're doing a little bit of communication, but say everything else too. Hey, we're building out the postcard. I'm scheduling to have the sign. Our signs are different because they've been socially engineered to be the most attractive. Whatever, right? Whatever your message is. Have a touch point, right? Before you go live, tell them all the stuff you're doing, right? In many ways, if you don't tell them, they don't think you're doing it. They assume the worst and think you're just you've scheduled a few things, and then eventually it's going to go in the MLS, and then you're going to be on to the next, right? Which is the case for most agents. Okay, so at some point you're going to go, well, not at some point, but 24 hours before your listing goes live in the MLS, you're going to tease the listing, right? You're allowed to do this. The rule is, as soon as you market outside of your brokerage, within 24 hours, it has to be listed in the MLS. That is a hard number. And if you get caught, sorry, I've got something flying around me here. Uh, Agents are haters, right? So if you get on there and you do a coming soon and you're a week out, and if there is any possible way that they can discern where that property is, it is a violation, and it is a hard violation. Like there is no well, there is a process, obviously, if you fight it, but it's just a fine, right? It's not like a warning. It is a fine. I forget what the number is. It's a big number, if I recall. Um, and they're really hard about this. So, but anyway, so 24 hours in, you're going to do a coming soon, right? And that can be, if you can do a story, you can do a formal post, whatever. But the intent is you're going to create intrigue, right? And curiosity, and you're not going to reveal too much because you don't want to, right? Frankly, this is a teaser for your follow-on social media posts, right? You don't want to do the full-on listing and just one photo and you're saying, hey, this is going live tomorrow, and then you spit out all the information about it. Just enough where they're like, huh, okay, I'm going to tune in to next time, right? So that's the intent with this. And then you're going to let your client know, right? Let them know whether that's a text. Usually I just do a text for this, and I just say something like, hey, I gave your listing a sneak peek on socials. Um, Chances are they follow you, so they're going to go on and look for it. Again, it's just another touch point. And if you learn nothing else, I want you to take away from this that you will continue to have touch points with your client on a daily basis, especially in that first, I say 18 to 21 day period. Every single day, you're going to be touching them to make sure that they know that you're doing work behind the scenes, especially now and especially on luxury listings, because you may not get that immediate feedback of you list it and you've got 3 showings scheduled, this weekend, right? That's just not how the market is right now. So again, you want to be continually contacting them on a daily basis and sometimes twice a day to let them know that you're doing the work. Okay. So time to go live. So this is basically the next phase, right? So obviously you've done MLS, but let's talk about that a little bit, right? So I'm a big believer in videos. I do videos on every single property, even if it is a $300,000 condo, up to whatever, obviously. Um, I will do video. So studies have actually shown that listings that have videos have just such a higher marketability. Um, some of that is a self-fulfilling thing, right? The property is nicer, so agents will include a video on nicer properties, and that's why that number is skewed. But I would argue that in this, I hate to say in this day and age, it's such an overused term, but video content is king, and long form and short form. So especially short form, right? So today's generation, and not to sound like an old fogey, very short attention span. They're scrolling, right? And this, I'll say this applies to people in all things, right? Before they go to bed, they're scrolling, right? It is short, immediate feedback, satisfaction loops, right? So short video clips, will get much more traction than a long form 3-minute video as a reel on social media, generally speaking. So shoot a video. Tell them, I get them to shoot it in 16:9 landscape. And it is high enough quality typically with these professional photographers that you can narrow that in. And it's still going to be 16:9, but it's this way, right? So it is a portrait style, I guess you'd call it. So you're gonna post the big one, right, on MLS and your YouTube channel and things like that. But the small version of that is going to be used in your social media. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube Short, TikTok, if you do that. But I always tell the photographer or the videographer ahead of time what my intent is, right? Especially with a lot of the higher end videographers, because they'll do cinematic effects where maybe there's something that's out of focus and what they're really focusing on is in the distance. Sorry, you can't see my hands. But that is going to be off center, right? So when you crop things down, you're now looking at like an out of focus tree limb. Like that doesn't make sense for your video. So I give them that perspective of what I'm going to do with the video ahead of time. So they always try and do things center frame, right? Or if they don't, they're going to let me know about it and say, hey, I really like this shot, but don't include that in your short form video. Or maybe they'll shoot extra content, with its center frame for you. Okay, so little bit about CRM strategy. A lot of agents they set up automatic searches in the MLS directly, and send that to clients. I never do that. I set up MLS searches, and I put the recipient as myself. So if I'm looking for a property that it has to be in this section of whatever the requirements are, I set up an MLS search for that, and the results get sent to me. And then I take those results, and you need to do it so it sends it immediately. And then I curate that myself, right? I'll go through and look at it and say, this one's nice, this one isn't, whatever. But then I take that data and I send it to the client through my CRM, right? And especially if it's your listing, always send a page that is tied to your CRM. And whether you use KB Core, which obviously EXP provides, or you use your own CRM, right? Follow Up Boss, or there's a few really good ones that are outside of the free stuff, and the free stuff's really good too. I shouldn't say that. But whatever, never send out stuff that isn't tied to something where you can capture, including your video, right? Now you're going to list your video on YouTube, and there's really not a lot of capture stuff on there. But when you send your video to a client, you're going to use a different app, at least one that I would recommend. It's called CRM Grow. It's actually a website, CRM Grow, CRMGROW. And that allows you, and I'll probably get into this, I think, a little bit further. But when you send a link to the video through that, it tells you when someone clicks on that link, and then it'll actually go through and tell you exactly how much of the video they watched, where they stopped, where they may have fast forwarded and gone to this point. It gives you a lot of analyticals, and you guys know me, I love analyzing things. So if you're sending out links to clients and say, hey, I think this might meet your need, you literally can go and watch exactly if they opened it, right? So if they're bullshitting you or not, and where they liked it, maybe they replayed it, maybe they watched it 4 times. It even tells you what time, right? So if they watched this 4 times at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're probably pretty interested in the property, and that signals to me that I should maybe reach out to them. And obviously, you're not going to let them know that you know all this data, probably. But you're gonna have that's gonna change your conversation, right? If you know they're really interested, then that's gonna change your approach to them. Um, okay, and again, so this is the live day. So have a communication, right? Send an email to your client. Hey, we're live. You give them a link to the property, but again, you're not necessarily giving them the MLS link. You're giving them your landing page in your CRM to the property. So if it's a good CRM, it syndicates already with the MLS. So that, all the data is there. It gives you all the data. It probably gives you more, actually. It gives you all the school stuff and walkability and crime, more like a Zillow listing, or like I'll say Redfin. Redfin has a lot of data online in their listings than just the basic MLS stuff. And then I also send them what it looks like in the other stuff too, right? So the big three, Zillow, Realtor.com, and Homes.com. Used to be Trulia in there, but actually Trulia has been completely absorbed by Zillow. I don't even know if there is a Trulia.com anymore. So I'll send what it looks like to them, right? And then set up the seller so that they get the weekly reports directly from Zillow, right? You have to go into the owner view. And if you haven't, as an agent, if the owner hasn't already declared the home as theirs as an owner, you can go into at least in Zillow, which is the largest engine. You go in and you claim it as the owner, and it says, are you the owner or a designated representative? So you're not misleading anyone. And then it gives you the daily access to the analyticals. It shows you who searched, who favorited, not who, but how many. What other homes they're looking at. The Realtor, I think, gives you how many buyers there are in the market that are looking at this, kind of home and this price point. But basically set them up so that goes to the seller, right? Usually it's a weekly basis is what I'd recommend. I think you can pick out days on most of them. So they've got another touch point, right, from those things, telling them exactly what's going on in the market. Okay. So I talked about video a little bit. So again, video content, both personal for you as an agent and as a brand, and then your properties in general. I'm just a huge believer in it, whether it's on the property doing your tours, whether it's a basic property. So MLS, at least Stellar MLS, you're not allowed to have actors or agents in photos, but there's no regulations of video, right? So you can be in your own video in MLS, right? You're not allowed to necessarily market your company or your brand in that video. Although a lot of agents do that as well, and there seems to be some leniency there. But you're certainly not allowed to be in it. So all those like what I think is tacky actually, where they're like, "Come follow me," and they walk through the house, you're allowed to do that, right? I don't know that I would do that. I don't. That's just not my style. I think those are tacky in general and overused. There's actually different trends ahead of that. Um, so what I do is just do a complete cinematic video of the property itself, and it's set the music and it's really high quality. And I'll tell you the person that I use. There's a few good ones out there, so you don't have to use them. Um, but always do that, right? So here's the statistic: 403% increase engagement in MLS. And then later on in here, it says 85% more inquiries for the luxury segment for videos. Um, and obviously, you're going to send all the links to the video the video into the seller. You're going to post it. So in MLS, you guys know you put the link. So that can be either from your videographer they provide, or what I like to do is actually put the link from my YouTube channel. And you guys all got to get YouTube channels. It's very easy. And your all of your listings at a minimum should go on your YouTube channel. Because you do that because it's not just the MLS, right? It's on your brand at that point. And then people can either continue to look at the other stuff on there, or maybe you've got your seller series on there, right? So there's some place where they can continue to click and learn more about you, right? And that's never a bad thing. Um, and we talked about CRM Grow. Again, I would encourage you, there's a fee for that. If you're an EXP agent, there are also a lot of pre there's a library of EXP videos. So if you're into agent attraction and things like that, there are explainer videos about EXP, and then there's just a whole host of stuff that you can use already to like send out the prospect agents, for instance. And again, you'll know if they watched the video and what point they rewatched and what time and all that stuff. It's a good a good ability to capture stuff. But do videos. It is very important, especially for a luxury listing. If you have a property that is over, I'll say $2-3 million, and you don't have a video and it doesn't sell, you just know that when I walk in there, if it hasn't sold and I'm going on the follow-on appointment to try and get that property listed, I'm going to talk shit about you about not having a listing video, because it is just like a sin to me. It's like $400 to do a listing video, like a really high quality listing video, maybe even less than that. So always do one, right? I think my guy charges $495 for photos, and they will be high quality photos, right? So the kind that you can see through glass, right? So he's stationary and he's taking multiple shots at different exposures. So he gets the advantage of brightness on the inside of the room, for instance, without the washout of the bright window, right? So he'll take a second shot with a different exposure to be able to show what's beyond the window, and then he merges those two together, right? So that is like next level photography, and most don't do that. So he includes those. He'll do stuff at twilight, which I recommend as well. And then he'll do drones, obviously, and then he'll do a full cinematic video, and it's $495, right? That's like nothing for $3 million property. So anyway, all right. So let's move on from video. We talked enough about that. All right. So next thing, and again, this is in that same kind of 0 to 3 day sort of period. So your digital curb appeal. So I always do custom domains. And what I do, sorry, we've got some background noise here. I always do I go into Wix, or you can go to GoDaddy, or whatever domain sort of thing you want to purchase it on. And I'll purchase whatever the address is, 123 Main Street. And then I set up a custom landing page for that property. And what it allows me to do is now I can send that. right? And that's either going to be you can build out a landing page in your CRM, like KB Core allows you to build out a landing page. It actually does one for you right ahead of time, and you can add to and take away. But any of the big CRMs, Lofty, you know, whatever you use, they all have the same sort of function, right? But it just allows you, you can do a lot more in your own personal stuff than you can in the MLS stuff, right? And then it's always going to be tracked, right? So when they get to your website, you know, you've got pixels on there if it's tied to a Facebook account. Just allows you to do a lot of tracking. I won't go into this. We could spend an entire day about setting up a property website. But again, it's just showing something to your client that hey, I have my own website. It's 123 Main Street. This is my address.com, right? And then all your stuff's on there. So you've got all your photos, your high level, your video, different contents. You can put all of, one video, but then you can have all of your social media on there as well, right? All of those videos. And then you can talk yourself and you can have actors and all your branding, right? Whereas MLS really restricts you in that way because they want to be able to sell your data to all these syndicates, right? And then Zillow can wrap their branding and sell it to another agent, right? That's why they don't allow you to put the branding on there. There's no benefit for the client. It's all about them being able to package and sell you and your data to somebody else, right? So don't ever think that there's some greater good for what the MLS and the realtor board's doing. As you can tell, I'm not a big fan of either of those, but um, okay, so and so that's your website. And again, you're gonna email that. You're gonna talk through the advantages, and you'll do a video series on this website, right? So they'll know about what you do and what the importance of this is ahead of time. So each one of these emails, if you build out this video series, this selling series, or whatever you want to label it, each one of those videos you're going to link to the email that talks about this, right? So you're going to talk about it in text, and then you're going to have a link to the video, right? Or if you're using a good emailing service, it actually allows you to embed that video into the email with typically code. And we can talk about that if you want to, so that when they open it up, they see the video. And sometimes you can have it play automatically, right? There's some limitations there, especially if it's a long video. And sometimes that actually gets caught up in spam as well. So you don't want to do that. So you have to play around. But the bottom line is this is another great time to reach out and touch your client, tell them what you've done, the advantages of doing so. Okay. I have listed on here too. So this is your digital stuff, but very soon up front, and I encourage you, especially on luxury listings, you're going to do postcards, right? And this is a two-pronged approach. Obviously, you want to sell the house, but you also have to do that postcard with the idea of the fact that you're farming that street, right? And this is another class that we have had some of this to talk about. How do you turn this one listing into five, right? Part of that is luxury farming. That's a piece of that, right? But you need to do that ahead of time. To do postcards right now and send them out in standard, kind of cheap mail is going to run anywhere from 5 to like 15 days after you submit your order. I use wisepelican.com. There's a ton of places that do that. There's actually one here locally. I know Matt uses somebody locally. I think it's what they do. But they need time, right? So do that stuff up front. As soon as you get your media back, do your postcard. You're going to communicate that to your client. For one, you're going to make sure your client gets one. And this is important. So if it's not a house they live in, you see this a lot for luxury homes. They live in Michigan, actually, as their full-time residents. Send one to their house, right? So they see that they get it, right? They feel it. They see that it's a luxury design and different. And then up front, you're going to send the PDF of that to your client. Again, it's just another touch point. Hey, we just finished our postcard. You're going to explain all the importances of the postcard. Now, obviously, you're not going to talk too much about, hey, I'm farming your neighborhood for future clients, but you're going to talk about, hey, I'm getting this sold because your clients, either maybe they've always been eyeing your house and they want to upgrade, or they've got friends and family that they think that you might be a good fit for the home, right? But communicate that, send them a copy of the PDF. Whenever you do one of these, it's going to give you a proof at least, but usually it gives you a final version in a PDF that you can save and then forward to your client. Okay, so if you're an EXP agent, we've got some additional resources. Obviously, if you're a member of EXP Luxury, um, there's a whole host of stuff, right? Wall Street Journal, Rob Report, Mansion, Haven, Market Watch. I forget, there's like 9 or 10 um, high-end online periodicals that your listing gets advertised in, right? And I'll tell you, coming from an independent broker, it's very cost prohibitive for an agent or even a small brokerage to sign up for these services. It's just, they expect a high volume and then it's very expensive per listing to do that. So a great advantage of EXP, we have so many agents, they're able to negotiate a discount. And then as you join EXP Luxury, you get access to all of this for free, right? So you have to go in and do this. So if you join, when you join EXP Luxury, there's a portal you go to and it draws all the information from MLS, right? It lists has all your listings already. It draws it from there, and then you supplement that, right? So maybe you want to rearrange the photos or take some out or upload a different video or multiple videos. Um, you're allowed to customize all of that stuff. So again, this is a huge selling point with your clients, right? Not a lot of brokerages offer this service. If you're a solo agent, you're probably not going to spend the money it takes to get listed in the Rob report and do all the international syndication. So what EXP does for international, let's touch on that. They use a service that used to be called List Globally. I honestly forget what it's called now. I take it for granted because I get free access. Um, but it goes into that and then it syndicates with like 100 different international sites. So basically, it gives you exposure in like 60 plus countries with like millions of potential eyeballs looking at it internationally. And international clients are a thing again. We went through a phase where Canadians weren't buying and UK slowed down, but now we're back in this, with the exception of Chinese residents, because we have that, Florida has that rule about being in proximity to certain things that if you are Chinese residents, you don't have access to. And it turns out like those things, like nuclear plants and power plants and things like that, they're all over the place and military reservations. They're all over. So even in Sarasota, I think we're pretty close to the Indian River nuclear facility, or there's something nearby, which pretty much precludes all of this market if you're a Chinese resident. Um, that's an aside. But anyway, you'll get the international syndication. Will you sell a house internationally from this? Probably not, just being realistic. But it's a good thing to communicate to your clients because they see that you have spent additional money to get their luxury property in front of all of these luxury other clients. Now, you could potentially sell it off Wall Street Journal, Rob Report, the high-end media placements because people actually look at that stuff, right? I had a client that looked at the Wall Street Journal listings all the time, right? So before I joined DXP, I had to go pay for that because I knew he was looking at it, right? So it was a thing for him. Um, Okay, so and again, you're gonna communicate this to the client. This is a huge thing. EXP Luxury is a huge advantage if you're a listing client. Like I said, a lot of some Coldwell Banker has a similar program, like Global Ambassador. You have to like qualify for that internally, and it's like 1% of agents at Coldwell Banker are members of that. So for most brokerages, it's really hard and difficult to obtain. Within EXP, it's actually pretty easy to become an EXP Luxury agent. I shouldn't say that. There is a production requirement. If you don't meet the production requirement, there's an education requirement. So you can take the training in class, but it's not too difficult or too time consuming to do that. And then once you do that, you pay your membership fee, and then you're in. You get all these listing resources, and it's just a really good story to your clients. Okay, you're in the showroom. So local visibility. So a big thing with luxury listings is local visibility. So both to the consumer, but more importantly to other agents, right? We all love the double end deals. It's not double ending. Technically here, you're a transactional broker. But more often than not, it's going to be another agent that comes in representing the buyer that's going to sell your property, right? So you need to make sure they have complete visibility. So the first thing that we start, on the consumer side is we have listings in the window, right? A lot of brokerages say that they have that, and they do, but it's very hyper market or micro market specific, right? So if you have an office on St. Armand's, right, all the properties in their windows are going to be St. Armand's, Lido Key, Longbow Key, right? They're not showing Lakewood Ranch properties in St. Armand's, right, or even necessarily downtown condos. And then everything on Main Street here, if you're not on Main Street or St. Armand's, first of all, no one's going to look at you, right? So if anyone says, we've got listings in our window and we're on First Street, by the Whole Foods, or we're on the second floor of something, they're just not, you don't get the foot traffic, right? So it's pointless. But we get a ton of foot traffic. You guys know if you've done floor time, there's always people looking in our windows, right? So your listing will be in there. There's almost always a listing spot available in there. Um, if not, I gladly give up mine. Matt gives up his, so you'll get a spot in the window, right? So that is another communication opportunity, right? This is an easy text. Take a photo of the property in the listing sheet in the window and send a text, right? And you're saying, hey, we're featured in our window display, yada yada yada. I can give you the statistics. I think we get like 8,000 people walking by on a weekly basis. I don't know. It's like one of the top 10 spots. Our section in front of Main Street in Sarasota is one of the top 10 foot traffic spots in all of the county. So it's just a good touch point again. And then again, you're gonna focus next on. Let me see where the next slide takes us. The local agent network, right? So, excuse me. Some brokerages have their own e-blast is typically what it's called, service. Some agents subscribe to an e-blast service. There's a new one that came on the scene about a year ago called MLS Blast. It is a non-brokerage specific service that just pulls information from the MLS. You can modify that, add your logo, your name, your phone number, however you want that stuff listed. And then you can choose, do you want that at a 5 mile radius, 10 mile radius? I think it's up to 25 is the max. And it's a set fee. It's like $30 or 34, $5 or something like that. And it blasts it to all agents that are in our MLS. And it's just an easy, quick way to get your just listed out for visibility. And then you're going to get a copy of that, right? So when you blast it out, you're obviously an agent in MLS, you'll get a copy of that. Forward that to your client, right? And then explain the importance of doing e-blasts. It's all about local awareness in the local agent network. And then you're going to attach your video to that, right? Where you're talking about activating the local agent network and how you get local visibility, blah, 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 right? Again, each time you're going to take advantage of the videos that you've already shot. You're going to send a link or you're going to embed that in the email itself, and you're going to send that to the client. And it is an engaging email. So they will spend time if they see a video attached to it and they see their house and photos and stuff on there. You're forwarding them the e-blast. They're going to spend time and read that, right? So that's an important one that you definitely cannot omit from the process. Again, we're still in that kind of I'll say this is like the 0 to 3 days. This is probably like a 3, 4, 5 day sort of thing. So we're in that initial 9, 10 day period. Let's see what's next here. Okay, staggered visibility. So we talked a little bit about your coming soon teaser. There's a ton of statistics that show that if you stagger visibility of any product, and make no mistake, this is a product launch, right? So if any of you have kind of formal marketing or advertising background or experience, you should treat properties just like a product launch. The property is the house, right? But there is a structured, time-proven process that goes back to, guys, strolling around in their carts and wagons and selling, Coke-laced or cocaine-laced Coca-Cola. It's the same thing, right? And there's emotional decisions throughout that whole process. But if you stagger visibility, so this is applying now to social media, right? So you do your just put or your coming soon teaser that builds, intrigue, right? And then you're going to do your just listed post, and that's either the date, zero day or day one. I typically recommend doing photo-based stuff because you might not have your video back by then, for one, but also you're saving some of the content, right? So don't give them everything. Do your photo post next where you're doing just listed and you go into a fair amount of description about, the house and the advantages of it. Um, and then you're going to stagger that so that a day or two later, that's when you're going to post your I'll say longer form video content, right? So I think a reel length right now is 3 minutes. It used to be a minute and a half. I would not recommend doing a 3 minute property video. I still like to keep them around 90 seconds because even that is it's very difficult to keep people watching anything for 90 seconds. If any of you guys have kids, it's like it's the same thing. We all become kids when we're on social media. Um, so that's like the next one. So there's just listed, or sorry, coming soon, just listed, which is photos, and then your video, right? And that is either going to be longer form or shorter form, and it can be just a property video. It can be you doing your cheesy, come follow me, and you're walking through each room. I'm probably knocking that too much. Um, so that's the next phase, right? So by doing that, you've prolonged the visibility process and you've got three synapses, they're called. So basically, when people see something, they need to see it at least three times before they remember it. So a good drill that I use when I'm meeting somebody, when I shake their hand, they tell me their name. I always tell myself internally their name three times. It helps me remember. And that's, again, it's just kind of a proven science that when you stagger things and have repeatability, people remember the property. So it's going to serve that. But if somebody's not paying attention, it also gives you lots of content, right? So they think that you list a ton of properties. If they see, in their mind, three different properties over the course of 4 or 5 days, they're like, wow, this person's listing all kinds of stuff. It might be the same property. It is the same property in this case. But from a future client perspective, it gives you more content and more stuff and just seems like you're obviously very busy. Um, Always end everything with a call to action, right? So even the just listed, right? You're never doing just informational stuff. Even when you're doing your own branding posts, always have a call to action. What do you want them to do, right? The hardest thing for a lot of people in sales is actually asking for the sales. And 90% of the time, people never ask for the sell. Always ask for the referral, ask for the sale. When you're done, your showings, ask for feedback, ask what they, you gotta be, people generally answer things, especially when they see a person asking them the question. Take advantage of that psychology. So in your posts at the end, always have a call to action. Schedule a private tour, right? You want to try and create some scarcity where you're like, this is going to go fast. You really can't use that now because most people know it's not going to go fast. But maybe there's some scarcity that you've created, right, in your listing description that makes people just want to do whatever you tell them or ask them to do at the end. But always include something. And different social media will allow you to put in like a button, or if you're doing a story, right, you can not embed, but you can attach links and things like that. Again, that link always needs to go to some place where data is captured, right? So send them to your CRM or your property website, where once they're on there, if they have to log in or if they're searching around, you know about it. And then we're going to talk meta ads here in a second, but meta ads, again, this is a separate class, but you'll set up a pixel that basically ties that ad to that client. And then everywhere they go, they're going to keep seeing ads once they've clicked for this property. And that's called retargeting, right? So they go on to, they come up and search, or they're looking at their Facebook or Instagram again. And all of a sudden your ad pops up again. And they're like, wow, my phone's listening to me. It's not listening to you. Like, that social media company is technically spying on you and capturing your cookies and things. But that's how that stuff works. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And that's its own class as well. Okay. Let's see. So this is kind of a breakdown of, I'll say, what most agents kind of go through. Sorry, it's difficult to see this whole thing. I apologize. But basically, there's four aspects of most sales in luxury. It's past clients. It's your sphere of influence, right? So you're going to publish this to everybody. So we didn't talk about that. So when you do your e-blast, that goes out to all agents. You're also going to email your own CRM list, or obviously any buyers that you've been working with, you think that this might be a good fit for. But you're going to send it to everyone, right? So everyone sees your properties. That's either going to get you a potential client, or it's going to show the people in your sphere, and I count everyone in your CRM as your sphere, that you're an active agent and you have a new listing. And wow, it's just another touch point to them, that when it comes time for them to list or them to buy, they know that Carlo actually does work, right? So MLS buyer matches, which is the largest group. Again, most people buy their house because of the MLS, right? As much crap as I gave the MLS, they're gonna discover the house on an MLS syndicated site like Zillow, Realtor, whatever, or a brokerage site like Redfin or ours, um, or their agent is going to discover it in MLS, right? So I can't knock it that much. It is the largest lead source and closing source, and then online marketing. So that's kind of a large bucket, right, of social media, pay-per-click ads, um, retargeting ads, whatever you do specifically for the house. And we're going to talk about some of those here quickly. Well, we're 2/3 of the way done here, so I'll try and be quick. We're going to run over a little bit, but again, each one of these I can go into just a whole host of details. Okay, so analytics touch point. So something I recommend that you should use that very few agents know about. It's called List Track, LISTTRAC. It is actually, if you are a member of our MLS, so Stellar MLS, it is a free service they give you, right? They paid something at some point, right? So this is a point where they're actually using some of all that money you pay for something good. And what List Track does, and there should be a link to it. If it's not in your matrix, which is your actual MLS page, it's in that page you get to before matrix, right? That has if you need to pay your bill and stuff like that, and then there's a link for matrix on there. It's probably on there. It's in, if I recall correctly, it's in like the products list. And you click on that and you get the List Track, and you basically set up your client. It'll have all your listings in there already, right? So it mines that data from the MLS, but what it does is it sends, analytics to your clients, and it talks about how many agents clicked on it in MLS, and how many times it was sent out for searches, and how many views. But it also links to all of the syndicated sites. So it'll show you in one report how many people went to it from Zillow and Realtor, and has views and saves, and really it's a very comprehensive kind of insight for how well the property is performing in, I'll say, the digital ecosystem. And it's free. So sign them up for that, and then they'll get that report regularly. I think it's once a week. You might be able to tell it how often you want that sent. And then send a note to your client, right? So they don't think it just magically shows up, that, hey, I subscribed to you, or I've subscribed you, right? So right away they think that it's a paid premium service, and it is. You're not lying there. This service, and this is what it does, and you should be receiving this weekly, whatever. Create a feedback loop. Text me back when you got it, because sometimes this stuff does, because there's thousands of these going out, it sometimes lands in spam. So you might have to say, hey, check your spam, whatever. Again, just another touch point, and it shows from an independent party what you're doing or how well this is performing, right? Now, it doesn't compare it to other properties. So if it's performing poorly, they don't know, because it's not a comparison tool. It just gives you all the data on that specific property. I don't think that there's a comparison in there. If I'm wrong, somebody please let me know that. But again, it's free. So I highly encourage you sign all your clients up for this once you've got it listed. Okay, so targeted boosting. I'll spend just a little bit of time on this. We could talk for hours on this, right? So if you haven't done ads on the biggest platform is Meta, right? So Meta includes Facebook and Instagram. It is the most cost-effective way to reach prospective buyers. And again, as a luxury agent, you're trying to do things that are different from anyone else, right? Not a lot of agents, they may boost a post, but they're not doing ad campaigns on Meta for their properties in which they set up ads and profiles and descriptions. And there's a whole formula for this, and we'll do a class on this. Um, Not a lot of agents do that. And certainly they don't do it in feeder markets, right? So your story in your listing presentation is that you go out and attract your own clients, right? We can't rely on the house to sell itself anymore. That's just not how this works. The good news is I can tell you the top 5 cities where most of our buyers come from or metro areas, and we know those. But I would always encourage you to go on to ChatGPT and go and just ask that. You can literally say, where do most luxury buyers in the $3 to $5 million range in Sarasota County originate from? And it'll spit it out, and it's magic, and it'll probably confirm a lot of what you think, right? Chicago, New York, New Jersey, but there'll be some outliers in there, right? There's like a Texas, there's an area in Texas right now, which is a very big feeder for a certain level of client here in Sarasota. So do that, and then you're going to advertise in those markets, right? So I won't get into how you do this. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to, but you're able to choose the area that these ads will be seen in, right? And then within that area, you can't just blanket everybody, right? They have to have certain interests. And we've got these all mapped out for you, right? So the biggest one is Sarasota. So if anyone has ever been to Sarasota that lives in the Chicago area, right, they're going to get one of my ads almost guaranteed, because that list isn't that, although there's a lot of people from that visit Sarasota in Chicago. Um, so you're going to market to them, right? And you're able, Meta allows you to really crank down and make that meaningful, so that you're not just blasting and spending money on 18-year-old kids that can't afford anything, or 80-year-old great grandmas that aren't going to move anywhere, right? You've got a really targeted audience, and it allows you to spend a relatively low amount. I've got some budgets on there. You don't have to do that, right? You can start this off at a really low amount. Again, you're showing your client that you're doing things that are different than what most agents do, and this is a great way to do it. But again, I promise we'll go into more depth in this in a future class for sure. Okay, let's kind of skip through this. Retargeting is a huge thing, and it's really cheap to retarget. That'll be part of that class that we have as well. And again, that's basically when someone clicks on one of your ads or your landing page or whatever, they then get retargeted, right? So now they got you, right? They know when you show up, if you're clicking on, Amazon has or Amazon Cloud has a great way of doing this. Google does the same thing. When you're on whatever Yahoo or whatever sites you're on online, you see a little ad for the house, and you're like, oh shit, how do they know to put that on there? It's people are like, my phone must be listening to me. That's what it is. That's retargeting. Or certainly when you go back on Facebook, Instagram, your ad shows up again. You're like, man, this house must be really interesting. I'm going to look at it, right? That's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to get that in front of you as many times as possible, because they feel eventually you're going to click on it and learn more information. And if you don't like that house, you're going to be like, well, this agent seems really cool. They know what they're doing. They're getting, they have this big broadcast channel. I'm going to use this agent, right? That's the added benefit of all this, obviously. Okay, open houses, broker events. We had a class on broker opens. A huge part of my strategy for selling is the broker open event, and it's its own series and class. There's a whole strategy that goes into that. Determining whether it's consumer focused, agent focused, right? If it's an agent preview, or what I like to do is a hybrid, right? Where you're inviting VIP clients from your sphere, your brokerage's sphere, obviously all of your own client, your agents in your office and their sphere, but more importantly, the entire street, right? So you're trying to sell a house, but you're trying to gain future clients, and that is all part of your luxury farming, which we have gone into in depth. Again, go review the video on that, and we'll continue that education series as well. But there's a whole strategy of this, and how you invite the right people, have the right message, and then you have to have some sort of different thing about the event itself. You're not just showing the house; you have this whole experience, and whether that is having luxury cars there or a mystery dinner thing, or live music, or a combination of all of those things. You're always going to have food, you're always going to have booze, you're always going to have some sort of entertainment, is the bottom line, always. Again, this is a 3, 5, $10 million home, so you got a budget for that, right? Not inexpensive, but we talked about how you bring vendors in and help you sponsor those things, right? So if it's a restaurant, maybe they'll discount things, or maybe they'll kick it in for free, and then you obviously have to include them in your marketing. Or maybe you're going to Sarasota Auto or something, and they're having a couple Lamborghinis out front, whatever, right? Whatever your thing is, um, you use other people's money, right? You always try and use other people's money. So if you can leverage your brand and create these cooperative agreements where everybody, it's a win-win, right? The people that you're selling to is the same people that the high-end jewelry store is selling to, and you're going to allow them to have, a little thing in this in the corner, whatever, that talks about their jewelry, and you obviously got to be careful that you don't create this like sort of bizarre, sort of environment. But done well, all that stuff, it just works great. But again, if you have questions about that, review the series that we already have done, or we will continue to talk this, obviously. And when we release our broad video mastery series about luxury real estate, a lot of that will be focused on the broker open and then open houses, right? So consumer or broker agent focused, and then the hybrid in between. So. Okay, let's talk here. So day 9. So again, we're kind of getting at the end of that second stage. Really, all of your delivery is done, right? So you built things out. All of your websites are done. Your photos are done. Your social media, your organic stuff has been posted. Your ads are up and running. You're probably getting some analyticals back from that. If you're doing print, and I think I talk about print here in a second, or maybe I already did, all that stuff is off. You may not actually get in that magazine or that newspaper for the next week or so. A lot of times there's a runway for that. And you can't ignore that, right? Luxury clients, especially if they live here full time, the demographic tends to be a little bit older, and that's just very important to them, right? So classified ads and stuff actually works. Like, people actually read that stuff and find out what was listed and what open houses are. Like, it's amazing to me that stuff works, but it does. And relatively cheap, I'll say. So you can't ignore that as well. And I think I go into that here in a second. So by day 8 or 9, 10, all that stuff will be built out and running, right? And that's kind of when you enter, so this talks about more communication. Sorry. So again, we talked about a lot of this. You're giving all of this. Okay, so this is showing specific, right? So hopefully by now you will have had a showing, or showings will be scheduled. If not, very normal, and set that expectation ahead of time, right? I literally tell people, we're going to list this. And well, first of all, this media has a build up, right? So a lot of it's lagging anyway, because they may not have actually seen an ad somewhere until day 5, 6, 7, right? So there's a lag there. Or maybe it came online and the agent, an agent, Michael Saunders, saw it and thought it would be perfect for their client. And there's a lag, right? They communicated it and there's a feedback. So you might not even get just normal, just part of the process. There's always going to be a lag, but especially in this market, very normal to not have any showings the first week to maybe even 3 weeks, right? So you need to build that expectation up front. But when there is a showing, this is a time when you cannot, again, you cannot over communicate in any of this, but certainly when there's a showing. Obviously, when you get the request in, I always try and do a little bit of due diligence. Now, don't be the agent that you get the showing request in, and 30 seconds later, call an agent. Don't do that, right? But you do want to get a little bit of information about who they are, because again, this is a high level property, right? So you can't just show it to Joe Schmo, or you can't set all of this in motion and it's just an agent preview, right? And that, I get really pissed off when that happens, right? Because you can select if it's a showing or a preview or whatever. So you want to have a little bit of knowledge about the client. Communicate that with the seller. This is who they are. This is where they want to, when they want to see it. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of back and forth about what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And then you're going to have, kind of, you'll do the showing, you'll get access. Obviously, you'll do the showing. I always send immediate feedback to my client in a text. So that is, be brutally honest, right? One thing about me is I say ahead of time, I am going to share everything with you with no filter. We can talk about whether that's important or not, or what things are important and what's not, but don't allow or at least convey that you're not going to filter things, because what isn't important to you might be very important to your client, right? Same thing. I say the same thing with inspection results and stuff like that. Give them everything. Don't be a filter, right? You don't really know what drives their motivations, but you got to communicate that, right? So I send them immediately. The showing's done. I literally sit in the driveway and I will send a text about my immediate impressions. And I always guarantee, hey, later tonight or tomorrow, I'm going to have communication with the agent and I'm going to get some candid feedback from their perspective. And then I'll share that as soon as I get it, right? Agents ghost you all the freaking time. And if you've done this for a while, you know it. It's like getting feedback is terrible, right? During the showing, I say, hey, I communicate this process with the agent. I'm going to request some feedback from you, based on I would really appreciate it. I say that in front of their client so they know there's an expectation. And then I try and be, I hope there's some empathy from them, right? The clients really appreciate, they want to know how things went, if they can make things better for the next people that come through, right? So set that feedback, right? And then ask the agent daily. All right. Don't just rely on that automatic thing that showing time sends. Text them. Now don't be like a pain in the ass about it. And obviously, like by day 3 or 4, if they haven't told you anything, they're not going to. Right. And sometimes, when I do showings, I don't know what the feedback is right away because they've left, or maybe, we saw 6 things and they're digesting. Or maybe they like it, but they have questions, right? So I may not know the next day. It may take me like 2 or 3 days before I really know, be able to give meaningful feedback, right? And that's fine, right? But try and get that from them. But the most important part is, if you're getting ghosted, don't ghost your clients, because your clients will assume that you don't give a shit about the feedback, or you're not asking, or you're not effectively communicating that. But if you're checking in with them daily and saying, hey, I pressed the agent again for some feedback, this is what I heard, or they said this, or they said that, tell them all the time. Don't ghost your clients, especially luxury clients, and especially if there hasn't been any showings and then they finally get one, right? And you give them the immediate feedback in the driveway, or maybe you give them no feedback and the showing happens. And then, like, you think it's okay not to communicate because you don't know anything more. Don't make that mistake. Over communicate. Even if you don't know anything, communicate with them, right? You have to maintain communication or they will assume the worst. Always. I've I've learned this the hard way myself. Trust me. You can be doing as much work behind the scenes. If they don't know it, it didn't happen, right? To me, it's like social media. If it's not on social media, it didn't happen, right? Okay. Let's try and get through this really quick. All right, so print still works. So I do mention this here, right? So especially for high-end properties, it's less about this is more perception, honestly. I hate to say that, but are you going to sell an ad, something from an ad? Probably not, because ads lag. They're typically dated. And if you are wealthy, you probably don't spend the time reading anything that is in print. You just don't. It's just the way we are now as a society. Uh, Part of our power positioning, which is the phase in luxury real estate in the beginning, where you learn about what attracts luxury clients, and it's different than what's important to the luxury buyer is different from what normal buyers, right? Their priorities is different, right? One of their biggest drivers is time. So, and you'll learn that. If you don't learn it from the series, you'll learn it eventually. So they don't have time to read stuff, right? No one, now, unless they've got enough money where they do have time, and that's a different kind of client, where they have time to read the New York Times, Sunday morning, and it's just their thing, right? Or the Wall Street Journal. So they're all on, now don't get me wrong, wealthy people read a shitload of things, right? Just in general, they just read, and I encourage everyone to read. The more you read, the more successful you'll be in life. But they're getting their news digitally, right? So all my marketing tends to focus towards that. But you still have to do this. But the biggest thing is just perception to your client. A good thing that I do is obviously there's the local stuff, right? So I've got a really good connection with Sarasota Magazine. So if you get a nice property and it's either interesting, right? Not expensive, but interesting. We can get an in the Sarasota Magazine. They'll do an online story for me. Certainly, if it's a luxury property, all day long. Like, just let me know, and I will link you up with my connection at Sarasota Magazine, and you'll get local coverage. And everyone actually reads Sarasota Magazine because they'll do it. It's not in print, but they have it on their website, and then they'll post it on social media. And they do it in a way that gets clickbaits, and it actually gets really good attraction for you. So there's that. And then there's like the observer and the other kind of local stuff. But then if your property, if it's in a niche, right? So if it's on a golf course, if it's an equestrian property, or maybe it's acreage, right? So it's a ranch, or it's waterfront, or it's a boating property, any of those, like, I'll say luxury niche, whatever the word is. I think Matt says niches. I don't know what Matt says. Um, there's specialized publications for that, right? In print and digital, obviously. So if it is a great boating property, there are at boating, yachting, all that sort of yacht life sort of stuff that you can do separate advertising in, right? And a lot of times this media is, well, all times this media is set up for advertising, right? Not not really there to inform you about anything. They're there to make money off of you, basically. So give them money, right? You'll print a story in there or have your listing in there. Um, Again, it is perception. So you're able to link to that story and tell your client that you have a really great boating property. So I advertise this in, Yacht Life, blah, 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 blah. Right. Again, it'll get extra eyes on it, but it's really showing your client that you're willing to do more. Right. And again, with all of these, there's email communication, text to your client. So you're showing them exactly what you're doing. You're not able to show them what the ad looks like, but you probably got a proof of the ad at some point. Send that to them. Tell them what it's going to be and do some background stuff where you say it's going to go in this magazine, which is seen by, 35,000 people on a weekly basis, whatever the number is, right? Send that to them. Again, you want to show them everything you're doing, right? Everything you're doing. Okay, so that's print. Okay, so PR stuff. We talked about this too. So I'll go high level with this. This is when you do a product placement in a piece of media, right? So everyone has seen the movie where they're like, I think I literally am always holding this bottle when I talk about this. They're in the movie and they're talking and they're drinking a Coke and you see Coke or whatever the brand is, right? That is an indirect product placement ad, right? Somebody spent Coca-Cola spent a lot of money to get that product in that movie, and it's a soft sell, right? When they first started doing this, it was like, I'm going to enjoy this Coke, right? It was really like over the top and like obvious. Now, it's an art form, right? It is very indirect but shown prominently in a way that you're being advertised to, but it is subconsciously, which is the best kind of advertisement because you're intaking that without realizing you're being sold to, right? So be a different agent. This is one area that I really stand out in when I go on listing presentations. I take that same, because this is what I used to do as an advertising executive, take that same theory and apply that to real estate, right? So you're going to market your property in the context of an ad or sorry, not an ad, but a post or a story that's going to be on Forbes, CEO Magazine, Market Watch, one of the premium things that people view, right? So if you're a high-end luxury client, the stuff that they look at online, right, which is usually investing things, high-end vacation things, they're looking at, if they're moving to Florida, they're looking at stories that are related to moving to Florida, relocating your business to Florida, how wealthy people are relocating to Florida, the increased business in Florida, the low tax, that's the stories that they are like, that's like, flies on poop, whatever the analogy is. So you're going to do that. So how do you do that? That's a whole class, right? We talked about this a little bit. There are sites that you can go to pay for this, where they either develop the content and put your house into that, or you will write everything out with the help of, ChatGPT and things like that. Literally, you can go into ChatGPT and say, I would like you to make a story about wealthy clients relocating to Sarasota, Florida, and then say something like, with this listing as part of a product, a PR infused exposure or whatever you want to. I'll maybe I'll send you guys the exact prompt that I use typically, and it'll write everything. And it starts out how this actually works is it'll be a story. The whole thing is about relocating to Florida, right? Let's say that's the story. It'll talk about all that, right? And it'll hook them in the beginning, all the stuff that a good story actually has. Um, and again, this isn't you, this is ChatGPT. Or if you're paying somebody, they'll do this for you. But all they're doing is ChatGPT too. So don't do that. Do it yourself, right? So you're going to make this content and it'll talk all about relocating, right? And then in the middle of that story, it'll say, and one such home that is on the market that is a typical that people would relocate, whatever the gap is that is breached. ChatGPT does that for you. But eventually it goes into, there's a break in that, and it talks about where would you move if you did this, or if you're relocating to Florida, this is the kind of property that's very popular right now. And it goes into your house and it has your photo, right? You give them two or three photos. It has those in there. Maybe there's a link to the video. It talks high level about the house and why that house would be important to somebody that's reading the story. And then it has your information with a link to your website, right? Your landing page that's tracked in your CRM, has all that stuff. And then it gets back into the story, right? So it's an indirect sell of your property in the context of a larger story, right? No one is doing this right now. Um, what does this do? Are you going to sell the house that way? Maybe, but it's going to show your client things that you do that are different, that you do to get your listing out there, right? If this goes as an article in Forbes or Wall Street Journal, millions of people are on those sites on a daily basis, so it has the potential to get in front of a lot of eyeballs, right? But this is just another step that you're going to win the listing ahead of time, because you're going to go in there, and while Michael Saunders has a really good approach and they have a really good track record of selling things, right? They're not doing stuff like this. They're just not, right? So they're not doing advertising in feeder markets through Meta and pay-per-click and the other stuff we talked about. They're not doing, kind of story focused ad placements. They're just not, right? So you're going to stand out by doing that. It's going to be different. It's going to be new, right? So this is a big one. Again, if you want to get into this, review the video series that have already had it. And if not, we can obviously talk at any time about that. So, okay, I think we wrap up here. So again, this is high level. I tried to lay out some kind of step by step and day by day. If you don't take anything else away from this, just take away that you have to communicate on a daily basis with your client, email and text. And I'm a big fan of doing a video series of that whole process from the time they sign, right? These should be like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 listing or videos that are 2 to 3 minutes each that talk about every single one. And you're going to create a playlist in YouTube, and you're going to send the link to that playlist. And then they're going to get on there. For one, it's going to help you win the listing. But then when you get listed, they're going to be able to go through each one. They're going to know all the expectations ahead of time, what's going on, right? And it makes your emails a lot more appealing when you're able to embed that video in there. But just keep communicating on a daily basis, right? Don't stop that communication. And then from a marketing and advertising perspective, do all the normal stuff you would do. I'll say normal MLS, but then really focus on stuff that isn't normal, right? And for one, you're going to close that expectation with the client because you sold them, you're going to do this stuff. So do it. Um, and you'll get more clients and more exposure by doing this stuff, certainly, especially with the EXP luxury stuff. When it goes out to all those periodicals, you're going to get extra eyes on it for sure. So somebody that's reviews listings on the Wall Street Journal, they're going to call their agent. They might call you directly, or they're going to call their agent and have an inquiry about it. So do that, communicate it, set expectations with your client that you're probably not going to have a lot of success immediately. It's just not that market right now, especially at the luxury level. So build that expectation in, but be over communicative, right? Because if they don't hear from you and they don't have any showings, they're going to assume the worst. And once they get that mind frame, it is very difficult to back them out of it. So always let them know that you're working, right? All the times. You're adjusting things. You're doing this, you're doing that. One thing I didn't mention, and I'm sorry about that, but there's a site called AdWerx. It's AdWerx. If you don't know how to do Facebook and meta ads and you really don't have the time or interest in doing all that retargeting, you can set up campaigns through them per listing. I think it's like $69 a week or something like that. And they'll put that on Instagram, Facebook. They also do pay-per-click ads as well. But they'll do listing stuff, or if you just want to do your own brand, AdWerx is a nice third party that just kind of does all that for you. And they charge you on a time scale. And you can sign up for additional weeks, and I think they give you a discount. But that's kind of a done for you service. And it's relative, I'll say $69. I think it's something like that. It's relatively inexpensive. Again, you're making, these are all six-figure payoffs, right? When you get to this luxury market, this is all six-figure payoffs, right? And you'll cap, right, with one transaction, at least in the XP. So it's all, it's at a certain point, it's all your money, right? So there's just a little transaction fee. And then if you icon eventually, right, you get all that money back with any XP, right? So if you meet that icon requirement, which is either transaction number based, or your gross commission for the year, or a combination of things, they pay you all that cap back, right? So you're all that 16 grand that you paid in, you get it all back in stock. So it's like they're paying you to be an agent for them. But anyway, so these are big payoffs. So my point is, spend some money, right? As you get into this world, there's a cost. So I say people got to ease their way in. Certainly, anybody can get a luxury client. Anybody, right? Especially on the buyer side. It is what you do after that closing that determines if you're a luxury agent or if you're a one and done agent. If you leverage things correctly and then you use some of that money on your next listing, right? And you be selective about what listings you take on. Let somebody else buy into the listing for a cheap amount, right? Or do the 1% listing, or let somebody else do that, or the house that is not going to sell. So be more selective, but spend money, right? And $69 a week, getting back to the main point, isn't a whole lot. So that's it. Sorry, I went over. This is an hour and a half instead of an hour. I apologize, guys. This will all be available, recorded online for you. And then with high level. So a lot of these things are going to be built out in individual classes in our mastery series. And if they're not a part of that, we will go into that in depth in a master class, right? So there will be a master class on Facebook ads and retargeting and how you structure that for the luxury client. But in the meantime, this is what I love doing. So call me, set up a coaching. I've got, Calendly link. You guys should all have access to that. Just set up a call with me. I'm glad to go over all of this. This is what I do. This is literally, I don't keep any secrets, right? There's enough. I mean, shit, there's $5 million and above luxury listings right now in Sarasota County. So there's enough to go around. I'm not competing with anybody. And if you guys win, or when the listing and sell, EXP has this model where I'm incentivized, right, as your sponsor or co-sponsor. So everybody wants to see everybody win. So that's the environment we're working in. If you have a specialty in one of these areas, please share it, right? Somebody else will share stuff with you. If they're a social media guru, they're going to talk to you, right? If you don't really know that, but you know how to do print ads, they're going to talk to you. If you're from Chicago and you know exactly what buyers are looking for, share the knowledge. So, all right, guys, if there's any questions, you can raise your hand. Oh, there are some questions. If not, cool. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you all, and we'll tune in next week. So Tuesday, we've got Matt's masterminds. That's where I don't know what the subject is yet, but that's where we all talk and share opinions with us, and then top leaders and agents across the country. And then next Friday, we'll continue another one of our master classes and dig in deep in one of these subjects. And then everywhere in between, we do live stream stuff with our upline and all the resources they offer. So, all right, guys, thank you. Have a great weekend. If I can just figure out how to